So I'm going to give you guys a scenario. Let's say you're in an arena game and you're doing pretty good. You got a couple of kills, you got some good loot, and you're running around and you run into a fight. Next thing you know, this player is absolutely insane. They're walking all over you, you play passive, and you get stomped on. That situation is all too common for so many players, and a lot of players are wondering, how do I actually outplay these types of players? And luckily for you, you know your boy Teckoh's got you covered, which is why in today's video, I'll be going over how to outplay better players in Fortnite Chapter 4. This video is going to go over various things that I recommend you do in order to basically be able to win more fights against crazy players. Believe it or not, there are some very simple methods you can actually do to outplay insane players pretty consistently. So with that in mind, I'll be showing you guys that in this video. Before we get into it though, be sure to drop a like on the video if it helps you out. Subscribe if you're new to the channel and you want to see more. And lastly guys, if you want to show some extra support, it would really mean a lot to me if you could use code Teckoh in the item shop. It's 100% free for you and it seriously does help me out a bunch. So as always, a massive thank you to everyone who uses it. But with all that said and without further ado, let's get into today's video. So the first tip for this video, and one that is absolutely fundamental when you're going against a crazy player, is to play like you're confident. What I mean by play like you're confident is essentially to pretend that you're super confident. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but hear me out. One thing that happens right when you start a fight in Fortnite is both you and your opponent make a judgment on how good the person they're going against is. You make a judgment as to whether the player you're against is going to be any good, and they do the same exact thing. Right at the start of the fight, pretty much everybody makes a judgment on whether the person they're going against is good, and that dictates how they actually play out the fight. On one hand, a bad player is typically going to try and play low ground, try to like cower away and avoid the fight, whereas a good player is going to stomp on the gas and do everything they can to get that kill. The truth is that even really good players have a tendency to get a little bit nervous when someone is aggressive and willing to fight, and that's exactly what you guys want to do. Oftentimes, we have a tendency to notice somebody is good, we start playing passive and scared, and it gets us killed. And if you're able to get some early damage in the fight and get the momentum going in your favor, you'll be so much more successful against those players who seem to always be stomping on you. Because believe it or not, even the insane players that you get stomped by have people that are better than them, and they know how the people that are better than them play, and therefore if you're able to play aggressive and not cower away from them, it's going to make them much more nervous against you, and it may help you win the fight. So what I'm saying here basically is to not be afraid to turn around the aggression and try to make your opponent nervous. The mental game is absolutely crucial in Fortnite, and this is something that so many players overlook when it comes to playing against better players. The second tip I have for you guys in this video is to grind piece control. Piece control is something I talk about in so many of my videos, but the simple fact is that it's so useful. Catching someone off guard with piece control is a fast way to win a fight against pretty much any player. Because the fact of the matter is, if they're boxed up and you have a good peek against them, chances are that you're going to win that fight pretty much every time. Even some of the best players in the world can be caught off guard with some crazy piece control and can end up losing the fight super quickly. Even if you're not the best mechanical player in other senses, if you're able to box up somebody and basically just piece control them to shreds, then you're going to win so many more fights, even against some of those players that you feel like you can't beat no matter what. So what I recommend you guys do to practice piece control is to jump into Raiders Piece Control Practice Map V3. In Raiders Map, there are over 25 different scenarios. You have the basic piece control scenarios, which are more like beginner oriented, and you have the regular scenarios, which there are an absolute ton of, and basically they're just a bunch of different situations that you can use piece control in. And then you have the piece control tunnels, which are tunnels that you go through and basically try to piece control every single tile. The combination of these forms of practice is so helpful when it comes to improving your piece control, and if you do all three of these consistently, you should see some major improvements. And of course, once you do practice it in this map, you do want to try to use it in 1v1s and stuff like that before you really try to get it into real games. But with all that in mind, when you try to practice piece control, if you can get insane at it, it's going to help you so much against good players. Because as I said, even the best players can get caught off guard and absolutely smoked by someone with good piece control. So moving on to tip number 3 for this video, and this one is going to be a little bit more controversial, and this one is the element of surprise. Now, if you guys watch my videos a lot, you're going to know that I'm a big proponent of basically playing from a distance, trying to make good plays, and trying to outplay your opponent that way. Very rarely will you see me actually recommend running into somebody's face, taking a 50-50 or anything like that. But as much as I hate to admit it, sometimes that can actually be very effective. When you're being pushed super hard or a fight seems to be going slow and no progress is being made on either end, if your opponent is much better than you at the game, or if you need a last resort option basically to win the fight, this can actually work much more often than kind of just playing out the fight like you usually would. Now, of course, I would recommend that you try to improve your gameplay, try to improve your piece control, and try to get to a point where you really don't need to do this at all. But if you feel like going for a super aggressive surprise play is going to be your best shot, then I don't think you should be afraid to do that. One big piece of this, guys, is kind of like a sub tip, and obviously it's a very important tip, which is to improve your aim. If this is actually a strategy that you implement into your gameplay whenever somebody's really good, aka when they're pushing you and they least expect it, you try to get the kill on them just by running at them, then I really recommend you guys try to practice your aim as much as possible. What I personally recommend is Raiders 1v1 Aim Trainer. This map is basically just an aim trainer map. You and your opponent both select a certain number of HP, you both select a certain weapon and a certain scenario, and you basically just shoot at one another non-stop. This helps you to improve your aim an absolute ton because you're basically going against a real player and playing it like a real situation. So if you can get insanely good at aim duels, you should be able to do them really well in real games as well. As you guys can see on screen, this map has a ton of different scenarios and it's super helpful. But with that said, guys, I'll put the code up to Raiders 1v1 name map right now. As I said, guys, this is kind of like a last resort type of option, but this is definitely something that you want to be familiar with and want to be able to do just in case you're in that worst case scenario where you really have to do it. If you're getting pushed by somebody who's simply insane at the game, chances are you can actually surprise them and maybe just get lucky. Once again, I know this is a very controversial tip, but I think it will work for some of you guys and it's better than just dying. So getting into our fourth and final tip for this video, and this one is to practice against crazy players in creative. The standard you hold in your practice basically helps dictate how good you become. If your standard creative fight is you just hopping in and going against a friend that you contendo every single time, then you probably won't make much progress at all and you may even get worse at the game. That's because you really have nothing to adapt to when you're playing. If you're just absolutely dominating your opponent and you really don't have to try, then you're basically just grinding your gears and playing for no reason. Whereas if your standard creative fight is against somebody who's crazy at the game or who you struggle to beat, then once you translate that into a regular game, your normal fights become so much easier. Now, obviously stats don't dictate everything, but let me just give you an example. Let's say, for example, you go against a 3KD player in creative. That's basically the person you go against in creative all the time, and that's the standard of your creative practice. Then you go into a regular game where the average player has a 1KD. As you can expect, since you're so adapted to that 3KD playstyle, the player who's really good, it's going to be so much easier for you to win fights against just the normal players you see in real games. Whereas if you're just playing against somebody who's average at the game, they're just a normal player, then you really won't be adapting to anything, and once you go into a real game, the average player is going to be better, if not the same skill level, and you really won't be adapted to anything higher. So whenever you run into an above average player, it's going to be a shock. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. You don't want to get stomped every single fight, but you definitely should try to play against good players. That way you always have something to adapt to. If you're able to adapt to those high level play styles that really good players use, then going against a normal player in a regular game is going to become so much easier and you'll get much more kills, much more wins, and your gameplay is just going to be way better. And of course, the same kind of concept applies to regular games. If you find yourself just playing pubs or kind of just mindlessly queuing into creative whenever you hop on, then try to focus more on things like arena and tournaments, since they're going to put you up against better players and you're going to have something to adapt to. That definitely beats the crap out of just jumping into a regular game and being able to beat everybody but not actually improving. So all in all, if you're trying to outplay better players and learn how to play against them, then a very obvious way to do that is to simply play against better players. But with that said, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on how to outplay better players in Fortnite Chapter 4. Overall, by playing with a ton of confidence, getting better piece control, learning the element of surprise, and practicing against crazy players, you're going to find yourself winning way more fights against really good players. Now, obviously, this won't give you a 100% win rate against players that are simply better than you at the game, and a lot of it is simply going to come down to practicing and becoming better. But hopefully this video gave you guys some ideas as to how you can strategize in these types of fights to hopefully win much more of them. If you found this video helpful, then it would really mean a lot to me if you could drop a like and consider subscribing as well if you're new to the channel and you want to see more. And of course, it's always appreciated if you could use code Teckoh in the item shop. It's 100% free for you and only takes a few seconds to type in, and it seriously does help me out a bunch. As always, a massive thank you to everyone who uses my code. You guys are seriously awesome. But with all that said, thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.